One day, there was a phone call from a mother who still lives where I grew up. I received a wedding invitation. But when I asked for the name of the sender that my mother had read aloud, I thought, I guess it did arrive after all. I didn't intend to give my home address to the sender. Moreover, if they had normal sensibilities, they wouldn't send me a wedding invitation. Still, upon receiving the invitation, I thought to myself, the sender must be in quite a desperate situation. The one I even felt sorry for was the sender's bride. The bride was my ex-girlfriend, whom I dated during my first year of university, when I whispered the name Tima. After a long time, memories of when I broke up with her came flooding back into my mind. I think it's better for us to break up. You don't seem to have much potential for the future. The day I met Emma, after 10 days, she suddenly brought up the topic of breaking up. Having been feeling down after losing my father a week ago, when I received a message from Emma saying, "I want to meet," I thought it would be something comforting. However, what Emma told me was a goodbye. Moreover, the reason for the breakup was that I lacked future prospects. According to her, I was so surprised that I lost my voice. After that, Emma tried to explain various things, but my mind couldn't process any of the words she was saying, as if she had said everything she wanted to. Emma left with a relieved expression. I stood there in a daze, unable to say anything in response, and watched Emma leave the relationship with the first girlfriend I had ever had in my life came to an end like this. Surprisingly quietly, a few days after parting ways with Emma, I was invited for a meal by Jeff. Jeff was the first friend I made when I entered college, and we're close enough to talk about anything openly. Still struggling to fully recover from the sadness of losing my father and the disappointment of being rejected by Emma, I initially declined Jeff's invitation. However, Jeff insisted, saying, "There's something I really need to tell you," thinking there might be something behind Jeff's attitude. I wasn't too enthusiastic. I decided to go along with the meal. The meeting place was a diner near the university that Jeff and I often visit. As I opened the glass door, I saw that Jeff had already arrived. Beside him was Jeff's girlfriend, Beth. Looking at Beth's face, I felt a bit embarrassed. It was because Beth was the one who introduced me to Emma. Why is Beth here? Is today's conversation somehow related to her? With that thought in mind, I took a seat across the table from the two of them. "Long time no see. How have you been?" I offered a conventional greeting, but Beth's expression remained tense. Her expression seemed even more meaningful and significant while we chatted about trivial matters with Jeff until our ordered meals arrived. Suddenly, Beth brought up a topic. "I'm sorry." I was taken aback by her sudden apology. Since her apology was rather loud, the customers around us turned their attention towards us. Jeff offered a friendly smile to the surroundings with a sorry gesture, attempting to smooth over the situation, ignoring such matters. Beth continued with her story. "I asked Jeff to contact Bob on my behalf." With that, Beth began to explain the reason she was present at the gathering. After hearing Beth's explanation, I thought to myself, I'm glad Emma initiated the breakup. It was because I learned about Emma's side of the story for the first time. According to Beth, she introduced me to Emma because Emma had repeatedly asked her to mediate and connect us. Emma was saying that she was worthy of being Bob's girlfriend. According to Beth, Emma started saying that to Beth right after the first time Emma and I met. The trigger for this was when Jeff, Beth, Emma, and I went on a double date together. At first, Beth was unsure whether to comply with Emma's request or not. It was because Emma's true intention of wanting to be introduced to me was painfully obvious. Indeed, Emma's intentions were exactly as Beth had suspected. "I want an easy and comfortable life in the future, so introduce me to Bob." Beth was told this directly by Emma. At that time, my father was the president of a real estate company. I have no recollection of it. But when I shared my life story with Emma, I probably mentioned my father as well. However, I didn't speak boastfully about anything at that time. My father was pushing himself hard and going through the process of liquidating the company despite his own health issues. The company run by my father had been struggling with declining sales since I entered high school due to intensifying competition. I didn't hear about this directly from my father. However, I noticed that my father had been wearing a more serious expression compared to before, so I had a vague sense that the business was going through tough times. Moreover, the strain from previous difficulties seemed to have taken its toll. During the summer of my third year in high school, my father was diagnosed with cancer. Furthermore, his condition had worsened to the point where there was no prospect of a complete recovery, even after surgery. Perhaps realizing that his life might not be long, my father was moving forward with discussions about integrating the company with another firm to protect the livelihoods of the employees. Of course, I wouldn't have told Emma about something like that. However, Emma might have formed the equation in her mind. That company president equals wealthy family. Beth and Emma have known each other since high school. Beth grew tired of Emma's personality and had considered ending their friendship multiple times. However, due to Beth's gentle nature, she couldn't bring herself to cut ties with the assertive Emma when Emma asked her to introduce me as well. Beth, feeling guilty about it, gave in to Emma's persistence once again. See me getting into a relationship with Emma and witnessing how happily I talked about her. Beth apparently felt a pang in her heart when Emma learned about my father's passing. She apparently nonchalantly told Beth, "I'm going to break up with Bob." Seeing Emma's demeanor at that moment, Beth felt even more guilty about what she had done to me. So basically, I'm being discarded her as I thought about it. A sense of anger towards Emma surged within me at the same time. My father's catchphrase came back to me, and then I made a decision to convey that decision to my mother. The next day, I returned to my hometown and went back to my parents' house after hearing my thoughts. My mother said, "I understand. Do what you want to do." And then the following day, I went through the process of withdrawing from the university. It was 6 years later that I received a wedding invitation from Emma. I received the invitation because when Beth contacted me saying, "Emma is getting married. If you're invited, will you attend?" I replied, "I will attend." I heard from Beth that Emma's fiancé is the heir of an air conditioning equipment company. Being one of the top companies in the local area, the wedding guests are expected to be numerous. Emma must have thought that she needed to gather a similar number of friends as the groom's side participants to maintain a good appearance. However, due to Emma's personality, it was challenging for her to approach people and find enough friends to invite, sending out invitations and receiving many regrets would leave a negative impression on the groom and his parents. Therefore, it seems that Emma set the condition to send invitations only to those who would definitely respond with attendance. I had heard from Beth that Emma was desperately trying to match the number of attendees for the wedding, so I marked the attendance option on the wedding invitation I received. I added the words, "I will be delighted to attend." And then the day of the wedding arrived. When I arrived at the venue and was talking with Jeff and Beth, I heard a voice from behind. When I turned around, there was Emma standing there. Perhaps due to my biased perspective, her cheerful expression seemed somewhat malicious. No, Emma hadn't changed at all from the Emma I knew before. She was someone who judged the value of things based on money. "I'm sorry, even though you probably don't have the money." She said that to me. I didn't say anything in response. Jeff seemed like he was about to say something. I stopped him with a look. Just at that moment, the groom's parents were passing by us. Then the groom's father stopped and looked at me with a surprised expression on his face. And then he said, "Are you Bob?" It was lucky that he approached me before the ceremony started. I attended this wedding with the intention of showing this moment to Emma. It's been a while. I greeted him. Emma had a clear expression of what's going on her face. In fact, My parents and the groom's father have been close friends since elementary school. I also met him a few times when I was younger. Moreover, my mother and the groom's father still occasionally kept in touch, so the groom's father knew about my situation. By the way, how's university going? Are you doing well? The groom's father asked me that. Yes, thanks to my father's support. I'm managing somehow. I answered like that. I thought you dropped out of university and were doing nothing. Emma muttered involuntarily. I had asked Beth to tell Emma that I had quit university and become a knight. In reality, I had quit university to reapply for a different university. I aim for the medical faculty of an Ivy League university. I decided to reapply because my father had hoped for me to study medicine at the university. In fact, my father himself had a wish to study medicine at the university. However, because he needed to take over the family business, my father had to give up on the idea of studying medicine. I had heard it seemed that my father had entrusted me with the dream of studying medicine that he couldn't fulfill himself. I studied with that intention, but my academic performance didn't improve as I had hoped. When I moved on to my second year of high school, I ultimately decided to give up on pursuing medical school. When I told my father about this, he simply said, "I understand." However, I couldn't shake the feeling of his inexplicably lonely expression that he wore during that time. My father's catchphrase was, "Challenges are worthwhile when facing high walls. Don't run away." Perhaps my father wanted to convey that message to me. With that thought in mind, I continued my university life while carrying a lingering sense of unease. And then, when my father passed away, I realized once again that what I truly wanted was to study medicine. When I thought of being rejected by Emma and felt like I was being discarded, my father's catchphrase, "Don't run away," came to my mind. I consulted with my mother to obtain permission to withdraw from university. And because I was anxious about burdening her with the tuition fees, my mother reassured me, saying, "You don't need to worry about the tuition fees." Ken gave me a push of encouragement. And then she looked at my father's portrait and said, "Your father used to say, I believe that he will rise up again. And he entrusted me with some money for this moment. He wanted you to use it." After hearing my mother's words, studied diligently, and managed to pass the medical school entrance exam. Now I'm in my 5th year on the path to becoming a doctor, so to speak. Well then, when you become a doctor, we'll rely on you, the groom's father said, extending his hand to me. I also shook his hand back with a smile. Seeing that Emma also smiled, but her expression seemed forced. The wedding proceeded in a peaceful atmosphere from start to finish. As I looked at the happy expressions of the bride and groom, I couldn't help but think, if Emma hadn't broken up with me, I might not have pursued becoming a doctor. Maybe I should be a little grateful.